Monster Tech is doing a giveaway on my channel. Stay tuned for details on how you can win. Okay, let's try this again. I think my previous video failed to deliver its intended message. I was hoping to outline one possible path among many that a player might take along their journey, but I think the way the video was framed pitched it too linearly compared to what I wanted to portray. So let's start over. Hello everybody, this is Oddjob Entertainment, bringing you another video. Star Citizen defines itself as a space MMO. It's got a lot of the space part down, but it's entirely missing the MMO part. We've seen the introduction of features such as reputation, but before development is through, I imagine we're going to see a lot of changes. In trying to envision what Star Citizen might look like down the road, let's start with character customization. We have this to some extent already. You can customize the look of your character at creation, but it doesn't currently have any bearing on gameplay. We also can only select humans as an option. But if Halo 3 taught me anything, playable elites are king. Where else, then, might we find reptilian villains? Oh yeah. There is a possibility that in the future, selectable races among the Xi'an, Banu, Vanduul, and potentially others are possible. This is something Chris has expressed interest in. Like so many concepts, only time will tell if this is one that survives though. But if you could select an alien race, how might that affect your playthrough? Well, the Banu are nomadic traders, so maybe the starting career of a Banu character has to do with staffing a Banu merchantman, or being part of a trade guild. Maybe playing as Banu gives some intrinsic perks specific to trading, such as discounts from fellow Banu, access to exclusive trade channels, and early notice of upcoming trades. There could then potentially be different starts based on each race, similarly tailored to the species. Perhaps as discussed in my previous video, finishing the Squadron 42 campaign unlocks exclusive starts for a human character centered around your prior military service. I won't hash out all the details that may include, but I'd encourage you to go back and watch that video for some of the basics. But if we expand on the human story in Star Citizen, assuming this is a new player or character, it's reasonable to assume that credits are tight and resources few. So just like any MMO, the goal of a player's first couple hours is to learn basic mechanics and set the player up with the tools they need to keep going. This often includes some starter quests that are pretty easy and quick to do. In the context of Star Citizen, this could include a ton of things. It could be farming, FPS mining, cargo loading, construction, and many others. You present the player with a few options and then let them pick something to get started. I think this is one point where my previous video failed. I focused on the decisions that character would have made, but neglected to emphasize that other options would exist simultaneously. If I were in charge, however, I'd give the player a number of starting options to pick from. If they pick construction as their first starter quest, obviously they don't have the resources to build a base for themselves, but NPCs would have building requests, as could other players. If a high-level player is busy managing org finances, they might not have the time to build an addition on their base. Outsourcing this work to lower-level players serves as a way to get them experiencing the game and earning credits as they do so. At the end of these starter quests, the player needs some kind of reward, something to make the invested effort worth it.
We happy? Yeah, we happy.
This reasonably comes as XP or reputation, which is really just the same thing with a different name. It can also come in credits, but we can get a bit more creative. Maybe pursuing until the end of the construction quest chain awards the player with their first land claim beacon. And once they finish that line entirely, they could go back and grab another beginner quest. Or they've probably advanced enough to unlock more experiences by that point. Assuming they've gone with the construction route, they know how the construction beacon missions work, so they could continue grinding credits, assisting in the construction of NPC buildings, player homes, org bases, etc. There doesn't have to be guardrails preventing players from doing anything, but there could be ample incentive to try out the quests to earn their respective rewards. For example, if the player at this point really just wants to farm, let them. But if they choose to do the associated quest, they'd be taught the mechanics, which could prove very useful, and they'd get rewards for completion. You attract more flies with honey than vinegar, right? So give a positive incentive to the players, and they're likely to complete that quest. Right now, the main time gate that exists is credits. I don't think that part will go away. In many ways, I see it getting quite a bit steeper. In the future, FPS gameplay will be fleshed out more, and one way to encourage players to experiment with that aspect is to temporarily place other options out of reach. This can be done in other games with locked sections, walls, skill checks, but in Star Citizen, credits is an easy way to do it too. I do think that many things in Star Citizen will need to get more expensive credit-wise so as to place them out of reach to new players. But I also think that this will be a natural result of the economy. In a universe with players already owning massive ships like the 890 Jump, what serves to curb inflation at the endgame? While economic forces can be implemented to prevent it getting too high, I think the dynamic economy, as is the case in many games today, will trend towards expense. There is in many games, after all, a point where you have all the resources you can consume, and so all income serves to build your wealth instead. These kinds of players aren't going to haggle the same way as a strapped-for-cash new player would, and this tends to drive prices up in-game. Couple that with the fact that high-end products are often produced solely by other high-end players. This creates a gap. This isn't necessarily a problem so far as it is controlled slightly, and if whatever progression is in place enables players to cross the gap themselves. But for that to happen, there needs to be a progression system. Right now, the only kind of progression we have in-game is earning credits and reputation. And for the sake of brevity, I'll be referring to reputation as XP, because it is essentially the same thing while being faction-specific. This in itself is nothing new in gaming. As you earn XP in mercenary missions, which I've made guides on how to do so efficiently, you unlock access to harder missions with better payout. But these missions are still essentially the same thing, just with more NPCs. You start off with 10 enemies, then 3 waves of 6, 8, and then 10 at the highest levels. But the difficulty is essentially the same, and the variety, frankly, isn't there. For Star Citizen to realize its potential as an MMO, we're going to need a lot more variety. So let's picture for a minute what more variety within a mercenary mission might look like. At the easiest levels, you, the player, do not have the best weapons. You haven't ventured to a part of space that sells them, so your options are limited. Something like the Tammany & Sons on Hurston that's all you have access to. As outlined in my previous video, you might not even be able to afford armor yet. As such, your first missions might be heavily stealth-based. You take a rifle with a scope and eliminate guards at an outpost. These guards, by virtue of the skill required for this mission, are all plain clothes and without armor themselves. This has some of the earmarks of the scalable difficulty in Skyrim. They go down in one headshot, but so do you, so don't get hit. The loot you get from these missions has value to a new player, but becomes overshadowed by the loot you get in future missions, as you'd expect. A possible next tier of mission might have you make a more direct frontal assault. This time you do have some armor, and so you can take a few hits, but it will also be important to stay topped up on health to avoid injuries. At this point, we start to see that enemies are using armor in some cases. Going up another tier, we start to see medium and heavy armor sets worn by the enemy. They get another boost in intelligence to up the danger, but man, the loot in these missions is pretty great compared to where we started. With the revamped underground facilities that CIG has shown hints of, we should also expect missions that outright require more than one player by virtue of mechanics. We technically have missions that encourage more players, but you can still do these by yourself most of the time. But we should see things more akin to raids in other games, where team coordination is key to success. One player might need to manage bridge control so the rest of the assault team can get across to the objective. And in these kinds of higher difficulty type missions, we should also expect some kind of boss fight. Maybe there's NPC exclusive armor sets in the super heavy category with a very large amount of damage reduction. Maybe there's a Nova tank down there in the depths that you have to disable using small arms only. This needs to be like when you run into a brute chieftain on legendary co-op with your friends and you're both running from the gravity hammer wielding silverback on your heels. Heck, that could actually be one of the scenarios. Imagine having to fight off one of the abominable snowmen that we see advertised as the future of microtech fauna. Now, access to this kind of in-game content is determined by a few things. One, someone in your squad has to have enough XP to get the mission in the first place. Maybe all participants likewise need adequate XP for some missions. And skill is another one. You wouldn't expect to find missions like this in the green zone, so you're looking for players that are venturing into the more dangerous parts of space. Third, overall progression is also going to be key. Using the assassination example that CIG has thrown around, suppose your character lacks proficiency, but the mission relies heavily on stealth mechanics. It's feasible then that the mission would be significantly more difficult without getting that skill up. As another callback to Skyrim, it's possible that your stealth mechanics gain perks in a similar fashion. Not having those perks then could be a significant hindrance to you and your fellow companions. I hope that this illustrates what progression along one type of career path looks like, but I'm not saying that this is the only way to progress. There can and ought to be similar progression chains for other careers with a host of NPC mission givers and regions of space associated with them. Ship combat currently does show a level of progression like this by swapping out the kinds of ships for higher difficulty ones as you progress. In the future though, perhaps the highest difficulty missions get tied to specific regions as well to encourage you to venture further into space. We could also see a lot more variety in ship combat as well though. Bombing runs, base destruction, xenothreat but without the bugs. Likewise, mining can have a questline tied to it. You might start out with FPS mining, get promoted to rock mining, and on until you're working aboard an Orion. But at any point, maybe you leave that group and start off on your own with a prospector. My intention here is to show that questlines do three main things. 1. They teach players how to interact with mechanics. The increasing difficulty highlights the importance of those mechanics and how they can benefit the player. A well-crafted questline will do this in a way that challenges the player without being overwhelming. 2. It gives objective measures to the player on how they are progressing. Have they or have they not completed the Siege of Orson? Do they have the Helm of the Ninetales Commander as proof of their accomplishment? This gives players something to work towards and a way to reflect on what they've achieved. This in turn gives an easy way to compare to other players that haven't yet done those questlines, and gives everyone a way to figure out how far along they are in the journey. Third, and most important, questlines provide the story and background that ties everything together. As corny as the College of Winterhold is, by progressing to become the Archmage, you get a better understanding of mages within Tamriel, how they fit in, and you uncover connections to other factions along the way. Without this kind of interactive content, everything feels disjointed and loose. But if the developer adds in ways for the player to learn over time where they fit into this overarching story of the verse, then they'll get more invested. Right now, the lore of Star Citizen is a massive anthology of text that would take a lot more time than the average attention span can handle in reading. But if you present that same information in the form of quests and interactions, the player absorbs and retains the information much better and gets invested in the circumstances around them. Their gameplay has more meaning to them and they feel more connected to the verse and other players. I hope this video does a better job of showing how quests will build on some systems already present in the game, while illustrating how having real progression enables more gameplay options across the board. I apologize for the confusion caused in my last video. I did not present my ideas as clearly as I wanted. Reputation is a good start, but we are still missing so much before progression has any real meaning within Star Citizen. Right now, we can grind XP, which gets us more money to get more ships. Getting ships is our in-game at the moment, and that's just not a lot of gameplay there. What do you do, for instance, once you have that ship? You use it for a few sessions, but then what? And there comes a point where you have all the ships you could want. What keeps that player playing the game? We need questlines and progression so that players always have something to do. A way to prove themselves in advance and write more of their story. I'm excited for the next topic that we'll be talking about because I'm going to be looking at how crafting and exploration tie into this progression that we've been talking about. So I hope with this better understanding of what progression means to me, I hope that we can work together to craft what Star Citizen will hopefully be for us in the future. And that's what I'd like you to help me out with below. How do you see progression interacting with these various subsystems? How would you like to see quest lines structured? Maybe give me an example of a quest line for a career that I have not discussed yet. Or, heck, even one that I have discussed. How would you do it differently? With that said, we are doing a giveaway courtesy of Monster Tech, who is an amazing company. They are graciously donating a set of chair or desk mounts for one lucky player. All you have to do to have a chance to win is like and subscribe to my videos and comment on any of my videos during the giveaway period with that video's corresponding secret word. This secret word for today I already outlined. It's let's have a conversation about progression in Star Citizen. Let's talk about things we can implement and things that we can talk about to make progression have real meaning. I know we're not developers, but it's always fun to talk about where we would like to see the game move. And since we are the board of directors in one way or another, we do still have quite a bit of influence on how the game progresses. See what I did there? But Monster Tech is a great company. They've been great to work with. I really like my chair, and they're open to feedback. They are constantly working on improving their products, as evidenced in an email that I got earlier this week, which I look forward to sharing in some aspect in the future. But ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of the video. So until next time, this is Oddjob Entertainment, signing off.